Hey everybody, it's Cherise, and I am sitting here with the extraordinary performer, Miss Christine Spencer, who also happens to be my mom. And we're going to be talking to her today about her life and experiences in show business. So stay tuned. All right, Miss Spencer, why don't you start by telling everybody where you were born?
Well, I was born in Washington, D.C. And when I was about 5 years old, my mother moved to New York, actually to Brooklyn, New York. And I grew up in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, yay, Brooklyn.
Yay, Brooklyn.
And so what, did your mom sing or anything?
My mother had a very pretty voice. She was always singing around the house, and, you know, it was nothing she ever thought of professionally, but she had a very pretty voice, and I would sing with her, and it was fun, you know.
Okay. And so when did you start having an interest in show business?
Well, I didn't really get an interest. It was just a fluke. I was singing with a group of young men called the Melodiers. I was the only girl in the group. And one of my best friends, Ray Smith, read an article about a show that was being done, and they were looking for an understudy. And I was like 16 years old. And he came and told my mother and I about it, and it was a fluke. I went over and auditioned, and as it happened, I got the role of the understudy in the show. I had never even seen a show.
Wow.
And I got this part, and I was just happy to be there. and then as luck would have it, or unfortunate luck for the leading lady, she became ill and I had to go on. And I played the role for about 4 days, and I was just beyond myself, and the bug had bitten me.
Well, it's like one of those Hollywood stories.
Yeah. And
The understudy gets sick, and then a star is born.
Well, not quite like that, but anyways, then I was hooked, and I then started auditioning for other shows.
And weren't you, or you still are, because I know this, but the public does not know, that you are a huge movie buff.
Oh, yeah. I've been going to movies. My mother started taking me to movies when I was a little kid. And believe it or not, all the scary movies. So to this day, I love those. And I just love movies. If I had a movie screen in my apartment, I'd see movies every day. But now, in today's world, I can see them, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
But, I still like the movie theater.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But you had a specific, well, lack of a better word, idol in like a movie star that you were so respected.
Lena Horne.
Mm.
I thought she was the most beautiful woman, and I just, oh my goodness, I just adored her. And I heard about a show called Jamaica that she was going to star in, and I tell you, I had to get in that musical if you couldn't. So I auditioned for it, and I got into the show, and there I was with Lena Horne.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, what was that like? Here you know, watching this icon, this beautiful actress, Lena Horne, in this movie screen, you know, for however long, and this is like the person that you're looking up to and highly respect, you know, and then you end up in a Broadway play with her. What was that like? I mean, what was she like?
She was absolutely wonderful. She was the nicest person. She didn't act as if she were a star. She was one of us, you know. Her dressing room was 2 doors down from ours, and she'd always stop in before the show and say, "Hi, girls," and we'd always say hi back. And she always loved knitted sweaters, and I could knit. I know one of the other girls and myself would take on a battle to knit her the best sweater ever. And so I did knit her a sweater, and so did the other girl. And she said she'd keep it forever. Mm. And she was just a nice person. Ricardo Montalban was in that as well. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But
you ended up, well, started after that, actually performing with a lot of different entertainers.
Well, I auditioned, and then after that got into a lot of other Broadway shows, and with, you know, people like Burl Ives and Todd Duncan and a lot of people who were stars. Mm-hmm. And the New York City Center used to have revivals of shows, and I did a lot of those.
And, oh, okay. And when did you move on to recordings?
Well, my friend, whom I went to school with, Malcolm, it was an sort of a musical genius. He was an arranger, and so when he was asked by the recording companies, you know, to make arrangements for the music of various stars, Jackie Wilson, my goodness, Brooke Benton, all of these people, and so he called on the people he knew, who he also knew who could sight read music, and I was one of them, and that's how I started. I started with Malcolm, and then other people heard about me and they would call me for sessions, and I wound up doing a lot of television, the Bell Telephone Hour, the Ed Sullivan Show. I was the first person of color to be a regular singer, background singer on that show.
And what was that like? I mean,
it was wonderful. I never thought about it as being the first of anything, and it was wonderful. And the people I worked with were all talented sight readers, musicians, so we never had a difficult time. They'd give us the music, we'd look at it, we'd do the show, and we'd go home. And most of the time we would have a session, and we'd have no idea who was going to walk through the door. We were just there, and somebody like Dinah Shaw would walk in, or let me see, James Brown would walk in. We would have the people who became stars. Dionne Warwick. I did demos with Dionne Warwick and Burt Bacharach.
wow.
At a place called Sanders Studio, and you just never knew who was going to be there. You just get a call, and there you'd show up, and then the artist would walk in, and you couldn't show surprise. You just had to do your job.
Right. What was that like?
It was exciting. It was really, it was exciting, but you knew you were there to do a job, and you wanted to do the best job for them. So you sort of put the excitement aside and did your job. To make their record sound good.
Yeah, because speaking of records, there's a record on your wall. Near your piano. I mean, I know the audience can't see it, but there's a record on the wall, and it's a Jackie Wilson record, Your Love Keeps Lifting Me Higher.
Yes.
What's that about?
Oh, gracious, that was another session. We didn't know who was going to walk in, but Malcolm Dodds, my school buddy, did the arrangement. And we were there, we had the music, and in walks Jackie Wilson. And of course we were like, wow. And then we did the song, we read it, and that was it. We never knew it would become the classic that it is today.
Right. So,
we were just there, and so it's nice. And of course there've been many imitators since, but that's us.
Right.
We're the original background singers.
Right, because everybody knows that Your Love Keeps Lifting Me. Everybody knows that.
And I'm doing that top part.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay. And also, I wanted the audience to know that, besides the Broadway, opera, and the sessions, and you're also an actress, because you've been in a couple of movies as well, and been extras in some movies. But let everybody know that you also had your own television show.
I did, and that was also just a fluke. I had a show called Around the Corner. It was on WCBS TV, and it was on for about 3 years. And when it originally started, it was 2 people, Joyce Denley and myself. She left, and I became the host of that show. And it was a show that was rated very highly by WCBS. It had brilliant children on it.
What was the show about?
It was about the music of the day. We'd have guest puppeteers and the like, and it was a show for children. We had 10 very bright children on there who would answer the most bizarre questions. They were like 9 years old, and they had the minds of geniuses. And so it was just a fun show that was on. I did it for 3 years, and I loved it.
And also, I recall, growing up with you, of course, I recall every Christmas there was a a Hallmark special that came on every single Christmas that I watched because you were on TV. Tell everybody what that was.
The Littlest Angel with Johnny Whitaker.
Mm-hmm.
And again,
and Johnny Whitaker was...
He played the little boy.
And he was also the little boy in Family Affair, the TV series.
That's right. That's right.
Cute little boy, I remember.
Yes, and he was as cute as he could be on that show. And that was done, you know, today it would have been done very differently, but it took us 2 weeks to do that show. And it was done in Brooklyn, New York, in a big studio. And it was just wonderful. We never realized it would be playing to this day.
Yeah. So let everybody know basically, well, first of all, what it was about and who was in it.
Oh dear, it was about a little boy who lived with his family, and he wanders out one day and goes up to the mountain and falls off and he dies. But his little body, his spirit goes up to heaven. And there he sees us. We're the angels, and some of the stars were Calloway,
Fred Gwynn.
Fred Gwynn.
I remember.
He was the gentle angel, I call him, and such a nice man. And it was absolutely, I mean, first of all, I was looking at Cab Calloway every day. And you expect that Heidi Ho guy. He was in character all the time. And every now and then somebody would get him to say Heidi Ho. And Fred Gwynn was this wonderful, gentle man who was just as nice as he could be. And as I said, after 2 weeks of taping this show, we all felt like a family. It was, and to this day, I see it's now on DVD and video and all of that. So.
Right, yeah, The Littlest Angel with Johnny Whitaker, and also Tony Randall was in it.
Tony Randall
and Connie Stevens was in it.
Connie Stevens, I'll never forget, Connie Stevens was in it, and she had to be strapped to her harness and fly around, you know, as a flying angel. One day the harness got stuck and she was hanging up there. We were all hysterical. But it was it was so much fun. Of course, she was a great trooper, and it all worked out. And so kids today can see it and love the same show. It's really nice.
You also started working on cruise ships as a singer.
Yes, that was a fluke also. One of my friends, Bill Dupre, who sang in the city opera, would occasionally sing on ships. And he had to go to Europe to be in an opera company, and he wanted someone to take his place on the ship. And I said, well, I've never sung on a ship before. What do I do? And he says, it's easy. You know, you get some arrangements and it's easy. I thought, okay, now, of course, it was going to be for 3 months. I said, well, I can't go and leave my daughter at home. So I managed to get my daughter her school, to give her her schoolwork, and I brought her with me. And we went on a summer cruise, and we stayed away all summer. We went all through Europe. I managed to sing. I think a friend of mine, I called him up, and he hurriedly made 44 arrangements for me of songs, and he said, I wouldn't do this for anybody else. And I wound up with this whole, cachet of music arrangements, and we went aboard, and it was certainly a new experience, and something, as I said, I had never done, but it was a learning experience. And from there, because evidently I had done an okay job for them, I was then called upon to do other cruises, and so I started doing cruises in the summer, and that was it.
And you did that for about 10 years, right?
I did, 1974 to 1984, and it was lovely. I'd take 2 or 3 months out of the year, and it was just great. I know people sometimes will look down on people. No, it was different then than it is now. It wasn't a planned show. There were individual performers who came on board and did what they do, and it was lovely. And we had excellent accommodations, and my daughter at a young age got to see half the world.
I did.
And my daughter, you. And you should tell them sometimes how you felt. And it was wonderful.
Yeah, because you got to travel the world, and you also speak a few languages too.
Well, my favorite is German. I speak German because I studied that in Juilliard.
Okay.
And I happen to like that language. Yeah, and I speak enough Spanish to get by, but I don't use it very often. It seems like the entire world speaks Spanish, but German is Ich spreche Deutsch.
Okay, I have no clue what you said, but hey, you know, I'm sure the German people understood that. Oh, I also wanted to have you tell the audience, how did you segue from Broadway and traveling and cruise ships and television shows and theater to what you're doing now, which is chef concierge?
Well, it's interesting. It was like having been at the museum. It was like.
Well, tell us about that. What do you mean? Which museum?
Oh, the American Museum of Natural History. I sort of stumbled upon a job there. After leaving the ships, I thought, now what else can I do? And I was walking by the American Museum of Natural History one day, and I went into the building and I said, "Are there jobs here?" Just like that. And they said, "Jobs?" I said, "Well, yes." And they said, "Well, we do have openings in the volunteer department." I said, "Well, great." So I went. I inquired. I had an interview, and evidently they liked me because I became then the assistant manager for volunteers in the museum. Now tell me how that happened. I have no idea. But anyway, then I was responsible for interviewing and placing volunteers in the museum. I stayed there for 4 years, and I then decided one day that that was it. I had been at the museum long enough.
And I think your knowledge of being in the union probably helped propel you to these different kinds of areas in your life, because you were a very major, important part of our unions, you know, AFTRA, SAG, Equity, you know, all of those unions. Tell us about that part also.
Well, when I was very active in the television industry with my own show, etc., I always felt that it's best to know how the organization that you are a part of works. So I became very active in the committees at the union, wherein I became then the head of the one of the committees, which was the committee for people with disabilities. I'm hearing impaired myself, and I became the head of that committee. And I was very active on the local and national boards. Those are the people who determine the rules and regulations for the union. And I was very active for many, many years. I segued from there to the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, where I became a board member and a trustee. And those are the people, of course, who are responsible for the television awards, etc. So anything that I'm involved in, I become a part of, I like to know the inner workings of. So that's how I became involved in all of those things. And I found it interesting, and I learned a lot, you know. If you're going to be involved in a union or be a member of something, it's good to know from the bottom up how it works, and that was what I did.
And so that gave you a little bit of an education as far as, I guess, segueing into the different areas like the Museum of Natural History.
Sure.
I mean, you've done other things besides that, but
yeah,
right.
and from that kind of, I call it that education, I became a part of an organization that trained people to go into television, and it was called the Institute of Cinema Arts, and that was formed by Cliff Frazier. I became a part of that. I was the person who would interview the young students who were going to be trained in the technical areas of television, not to be on camera. And we've had many successes. Many of our young people who graduated are in the television industry now. Nick Holavati, who's an engineer at ABC. We have others who are very active in the George Patterson, etc., who are very active, and many of them came out of our training program.
I remember some of the people that went to that school. Even Phyllis Stickney was one of those people.
Yes, she was.
So there have been a lot of successful people that came out of that
Absolutely.
institute.
Absolutely.
Which is really good. And you were friends with a lot of different people. I remember personally some of the people that used to come over and visit, and one of our dearest friends was Ossie Davis.
Oh, Ossie. I was in a play with Ossie called The Zulu and the Zeta. That's where I met Ossie and Louis Gossett.
Mm-hmm.
They were in it starred Menashe Skolnick. So we were all in that musical. I auditioned, of course, and got in it. So that was an experience too, to be in something with these people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And Menashe Skolnick, who at the time was older, and he was a very famous Jewish actor, and he was hilarious. He was the funniest man in the universe, and it was just a gem to be in that with them.
Mm-hmm. You are now the chef concierge at a major hotel here in New York City. And why don't you tell us how that became a part of your life?
It's funny. I had left the museum, and I was just wandering around, you know. I was trying to think of, well, now what can I do? And I literally passed by a hotel called the Omni Park Central Hotel. And I went in there, and I saw, you know, I looked around, and I asked them, I said, are there any jobs in here? And they said, well, yeah, they're looking for a concierge. Now, I had never been a concierge. I didn't even know what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And they said yes, and I said, well, where do I go to, you know, get the interview? And they directed me to the right place. I went over there. I spoke to the lady. Evidently, she was impressed enough to give me the job, and I got the job. And there I was at the Omni Park Central Hotel as a concierge, not knowing what I was supposed to do. But I quickly caught on, and I stayed there for 4 years, and then I moved on. I was wandering down the street one day and saw this brand new building going up, and I went in and said, is this a hotel? And they said yes. And I went in, and they said they were looking for a concierge, and I thought, well, now should I leave the other place? And I went in and I interviewed, and I was accepted. So then I had to go back to my other job and say, well, I'm not going to be here anymore. But it was okay. They, you know, it wasn't as if I deserted the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got the position at the Park Central, the Renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
And after years of being there, I became the chef concierge, which is the head of all the concierges. And that's where I am today.
Mm-hmm. And you're also a Clé d'Or member. Can you tell people what that is?
Yes, Le Clé d'Or, Le Clé d'Or USA, that is the international organization of concierges. And they're the people who wear the 2 gold keys on their jackets. Mm. And it's a very strong organization. It's worldwide. It's every country in the world. And you have to take a very stringent, very difficult test. And you have to have been a concierge for 4 years in good standing at the hotel that you work. Mm-hmm. Once you take the exam, then it has to be approved, etc. And then you are allowed to wear the keys, and you are a member of the international organization. Mm-hmm. And they have conferences all over the world every year, and I've attended many of them. And this year their congress is in Los Cabos. Last year it was in Dubai. So I've gone to Prague and many places, and in the last few years I haven't gone, but they know that I'm there in spirit.
Right, right. And you've also gotten a few awards, too, from being a hotel concierge.
Yes.
Do you think you'll ever do another show again or anything like that in the future?
You never know. You know, you never say never. I just might one day decide to get up and sing a few songs and, you know, then do what I love, because I still love singing very much. And I'm going to say never say never.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great way to end this little interview. And we can always do a part 2, because I find you fascinating, and I know a lot of other of my friends and other people find you extraordinarily fascinating. So, we'll have to do this another time and do part 2. In the meantime, thanks so much for agreeing to do this interview with your crazy daughter. And
You're welcome.
thanks so much, and we'll see you again next time.
Alrighty, thank you. Thanks for asking me.
You're welcome.